Step 1, take a hammer to the bathroom scale. Step 2, rip up all the diet rule books. And step 3, get ready to redefine what health and well-being means to you. And guess what? It's not your weight, it's not your shape, and it's not how much space you take up. Welcome to Body Kindness. I'm Rebecca Scritchfield. I'm the author of the book Body Kindness and host for this podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. I ask that you keep an open mind as we have interesting conversations about what it means in this culture to resist and reject and divest from the norms of health is only for people who are pursuing thinness and weight loss and dieting. We can say no to that. That does not help many people create a better life. But through this show and our conversations, I am confident that you will find your own meaningful path to a happier and healthier life. Even if you want things to change, that's okay. But we have a whole lot of unlearning to do, and I invite you to join me on the unlearning.
And so it is so easy to spend time mindlessly. And I'm a big fan of consciously chosen downtime. I am not saying like pack every minute of every day with something productive, which I'm putting in air quotes here. I mean, that's ridiculous. And, if you have a favorite TV show you love to watch, like by all means, watch it. Notice that you're watching it, savor it, enjoy it, like watch it with a friend or loved one, sit there and really experience that pleasure. The problem is when we sort of, haven't thought about what we'd like to do with our downtime and sort of just turn on the TV and scroll around from thing to thing that we don't care about. And then we're like, oh, I have no free time. Well, you do. It's just you didn't think about it and you weren't mindful of it. And so then it passes as if it didn't happen. And that's where we have the problem.
Well, that was Laura Vanderkam. She's the author of several time management books, including Juliet's School of Possibilities and Off the Clock. She hosts the podcast Before Breakfast and co-hosts with Sarah Hart Unger the podcast Best of Both Worlds. She lives outside Philadelphia with her husband and 4 children, and she blogs at lauravanderkam.com. I am so excited to bring you this episode. This is a Body Kindness listener request. I get a lot of people asking me about how to handle time and, yes, manage time and everything like that. I really hope that you take away a lot from our conversation. We have about a 30-minute chat, and then later on in the show, I answer your questions. So here's what you're going to get out of the show. We talk about the value of open space to avoid being late. That was particularly helpful to me. And also the value in savoring the good moments, how we tend to put stuff in the calendar just because we're available instead of really thinking about why leaving white space is more helpful and feeling good about our time use. We also talk about how to know when you're saying yes to the right things and create lots of spiral ups in your lives, things that can help you make a good memory. We also dish about how to give yourself permission to leave those dishes in the sink, the cobwebs in the corner, and have some meaningful fun rather than mindless distractions, which is usually what happens when we're not kind of creating that ideal use of our time in our lives. We just kind of veg out. We discuss this in detail. I think this is really going to help people who feel burned out. In fact, I have a few Body Kindness reader questions about time I'll be answering after the chat with Laura. Once again, her latest book is Off the Clock. Before we get into the interview, I want to let helping professionals who are listening know that I'll be opening applications for my 10-month virtual mentor program soon. Visit bodykindnessbook.com/learn-and-grow. Give your name and email, and you'll learn more about how I can help you succeed in your business, embrace your body kindness in your work, and also strengthen your knowledge and skills in weight-inclusive wellness. Again, that link is bodykindnessbook.com/learn-and-grow. Hey, Laura, welcome to Body Kindness.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm really excited to have you on the show today. And I love to let listeners know how I first come across guests. And this may be somewhat of a surprise to you as well. But the story is when I was writing Body Kindness, I knew I was going to need to talk about time and time management. And in all honesty, I was still very much struggling with it as a mom to two young girls and just always feeling like I had to fill up my to-do list. And you had a book out at the time called I Know How She Does It. And I was like, how? So I devoured that audiobook, and it actually served as part of inspiration for the time structures and guidance that I gave to folks in Body Kindness. And then I came across you again at TED Women. I was attending, and the whole theme was time, and your talk was amazing there. I'll make sure folks have that in our show notes. And you also have another book. I think it's your latest, and I would not be surprised if you're working on more, but I'm about halfway through now, but I want to give that book a plug. It's called Off the Clock. And it is really something that I'm hoping that we can talk about today, because I really feel like in my own life, that's my next pivot. It's this idea of like, what does it even mean to set these time boundaries so that you feel like you can get a really joyful life because you literally are off the clock? So yeah, I'm so grateful for you. I know you've got 4 kids. And so I feel like this is the time pro I need to hear from, not anybody who's not living a real struggle with time. So thank you so much for being here. And I would love it if you could just let listeners know a little bit more about you, who you are, and what you do.
Yeah, well, thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm so glad we got to meet each other in person at TED Women. Yeah, no, I've been writing about time for 10 or so years, several books on the topic. I love to speak about it as well. Approached from the perspective that we all have the same amount of time. There are various other things in life that are unequal, but time, at least, we all have the same amount. And so I love studying what various successful people are doing with their time, because I think the rest of us can learn from it. And as you said, I particularly like to look at people who are dealing with lots of things. So, people who are raising families, who are building careers, who are involved in their communities, because I think that they really show how you make all the pieces fit together. Off the Clock came out about a year ago, and that's a book that looks at how we feel about time and how we can structure our lives to achieve a sense of time abundance. And then I actually also had a short book come out in March of this year that was a fable, a time management fable called Juliet's School of Possibilities. So people might want to check that out too.
Oh, that sounds very interesting. Well, one of the first things that I wanted to say, like at the very beginning, and just, in my counseling with clients, the idea of shame comes up a lot and so much. And I want to make sure that we, just let our listeners know that the goal here is not to be shooting all over you. Like, well, if they can do it, then you should be able to do it. Or that is not what we're saying. What we hope to be able to convey to folks is a sense of understanding and a sense of compassion for how difficult it is to be in a position where you feel like your time isn't your own. And as you had indicated earlier, that there are other barriers that can, make things difficult, whether that's the amount of money you have, which might mean that in order to just kind of live and survive, that a lot of your time is sucked up into 2 jobs, say, or somebody there's not maybe a equal distribution in family and work, and so I'm a working mom. I know you're a working mom. That struggle can be real. So that we're not trying to say you should do this, you should do that. It's much more about empathy and real solutions, and also practical solutions that even if your mind is saying, I can't do that, or that sounds way too hard, we want to help people change their relationship to time.
Exactly. Because I do believe that we can all do something. And, the fact that somebody else does X, Y, or Z doesn't in and of itself mean that you need to do X, Y, or Z. But I think it's interesting to learn from. And we can decide, well, does that look like something I'd be interested in, or is it not? And, one of the reasons I wrote that book, I Know How She Does It, that you mentioned in the introduction, is I know a lot of us who are in the position of juggling work and family really can benefit from hearing what other people have figured out. I mean, there are certain questions that you are not the first person to face. Like maybe you and your partner both travel for work. How do you deal with the childcare situation with that? Well, guess what? You're not the only couple to have dealt with that. And so, that maybe the other couples have some other thing that's different from you, but by looking at their solutions, you can say, well, maybe something of that would work for me, or though here's a different idea that I hadn't thought of, but I should look into that. And so it's all about helping each other figure these things out.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think being open, like a sense of openness, because we all have this inner critic voice in our mind, and also, some level of perfectionism, right? Even the idea that we're gonna examine our use of time can feel vulnerable. I know you advocate for tracking your time. And when I was listening to that, I was like, oh, I feel scared. Like that was the first gut reaction, was like, I feel scared even at the idea of documenting how I'm spending my time. And interestingly, I don't really know, like, am I afraid that that's another to do, or I'm afraid I'm going to find that I'm wasting time? But kind of that the point is that when you see your actual time, you can build in some negotiation. So I think that could be a good place to start. Like, tell me about why you advocate for tracking your time. And for someone like me who's like, oh my gosh, that scares me, what is the promise? What is the benefit out of going through that difficult exercise? What could we possibly see as a benefit?
Yeah, it really shouldn't be that scary. I always tell people, like, yes, we're going to find out that you waste time. And that's because 100% of people waste time. Like I waste time. I waste tons of time. This is not about figuring that out. It's not about playing gotcha. Like, ooh, you claim to be busy, but you were on Twitter for 10 hours last week or whatever it is. It's not about that. I mean, that might be an interesting discovery. And you might say like, oh, well, isn't that curious? I've been telling myself I'd like to practice the flute, and yet I'm not. Let me think about why. And if one of those 10 hours on Twitter could be redeployed for playing my flute. But now I think it's more about making sure that we have correct narratives about our lives. And the thing with time is that it keeps passing whether you think about how you're spending it or not. And so it's very easy to spend it mindlessly, and it's very easy to develop these narratives that are more based on our feelings in the moment than on any objective truth. Like, so if you're tired, you probably have a story that I don't sleep enough. I mean, that seems like a very logical story, but it can also be that we are tired at different points in the day, or it could be that you didn't get enough sleep last night, but on other nights you do. And so maybe it's more that we need to examine what went differently last night versus, some larger, like, oh, everything is falling apart kind of narrative. Especially people who are juggling work and family. There are all sorts of problematic narratives that are particularly, that draw women in, like if I work full time, I'll never see my family, right? That's a very common one. Mathematically, this is just not true. I mean, there are 168 hours in a week. If you work 40 hours and sleep 8 hours a night, so that's 56 hours per week, you still have 72 waking, non-working hours. So presumably your family's around for some of them, but like people don't think of it that way, right? Like they just like, oh, but it's my a full-time job is my full time. Therefore, I must never see my family. And the good news about tracking your time is that you will very clearly see those 72 hours. Like they'll be there. And then you can start to say, oh, well, that's interesting. Actually, more of the problem is that I'd really like to be able to drop my kids off at school, and my current schedule doesn't allow that. Now, let me look at that as an issue that maybe I can figure out a way to, shift my hours one day a week and do it. Or, maybe I just am holding on to this as an idea for no real reason. Or maybe my boss doesn't actually care what time I show up. Like there's all sorts of things you can then determine once you look at the real issue, as opposed to these sort of broad defeatist narratives.
Mm-hmm. So that really is the foundation, right? Like if it, in Laura Vanderkam's world, if you were going to start to improve your life through how you experience time and your relationship to time, like you really have to start by an agreement to track your time for like a week. Is that about right?
I would really recommend people do it. And I know there's always reasons that people won't, but it's really not that bad. If you can't get through a week, try sitting down right now and thinking about how you spent the past 24 hours. All right? Because that means you're not doing it going forward. You're just looking at the past 24 hours, which are come and gone. Like we can talk about them without making it this huge ordeal. And then once you have 24 hours, like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Maybe I can just do another 24 hours. And now you already have 2 days. Like really, that's starting to show you some things. If you can do 2 weekdays and 1 weekend day, you'll get a very good picture of your life. But a week is ideal, because that's a cycle of life as we live it. And making sure that we look at the weekends as well makes us have a complete picture of time. I find that people often don't even consider weekends, like they don't exist, but that's ridiculous. I mean, they're a big chunk of our hours. So it's like saying, when I go on a cruise ship, all the food is whatever, it's like to put it in these, that sort of reference, it's still part of life. Like it doesn't help to view it as irrelevant.
Yeah. It's even interesting just to think about what does that say about our values if we shun the weekends as usable, workable time that could be filling up our lives. I mean, I know often my mind of the weekends, like catch up mode, meal planning, grocery shopping, just sort of how do you recover from that week and get ready again? But I just think also a big element of this is even being in the position where we can notice when time is being well spent, and notice maybe when we're not getting what we wanted to out of some of our free time. And in that element of noticing, what that's really about is mindfulness. And I loved hearing you say early on and off the clock that this was really a book rooted in mindfulness. Body kindness is also rooted in mindfulness and this idea of if we can have a presence in how we're feeling or what our body is trying to tell us, that we really can make the next positive self-care choice based on information like that. And in the time management sense of things, you talk about it in terms of mindfulness as the daily discipline of minding one's hours. And I love the metaphor you use about it's like tending to your time like you tend to a garden, and that ultimately it will make you feel like you have more time, this abundance, and also that life in general is lighter. And I get a sense of like lighter and happier. And like, we're not saying perfect, like you're always happy, but on the whole, there's more joyful moments. There's more downtime that is enjoyed because you've given yourself permission to do that. So I would love to home in on that concept of time management and mindfulness for folks, because I think a lot of people like the idea of mindful presence, but they might not quite see how that relates to how they're spending their time.
Yeah, I mean, as we talked about, time keeps passing regardless of whether you think about how you're spending it. And so it is so easy to spend time mindlessly. And I'm a big fan of consciously chosen downtime. I am not saying like pack every minute of every day with something productive, which I'm putting in air quotes here. I mean, that's ridiculous. And, if you have a favorite TV show you love to watch, like by all means, watch it. Like notice that you're watching it, savor it, enjoy it, like watch it with a friend or loved one, sit there and really experience that pleasure. The problem is when we sort of, haven't thought about what we'd like to do with our downtime and sort of just turn on the TV and scroll around from thing to thing that we don't care about. And then we're like, oh, I have no free time. Well, you do. It's just you didn't think about it and you weren't mindful of it. And so then it passes as if it didn't happen. And that's where we have the problem. So yeah, tending the garden is the metaphor I landed on because, gardens are a lot of work. I mean, they're beautiful. They're also a lot of work. Like you never, as a gardener, get to this point where like, oh, I'm done. I don't have to deal with that anymore. Like this thing is just totally on autopilot, right? And I mean, there's certainly, you can get to places where it's very routine and you're doing mostly maintenance and you're only occasionally having to do big projects, but it's never entirely done. But you're still making a thing of profound beauty. And I think if we approach our schedules the same way, knowing that we do need to constantly work at them and, tweak them and decide, is this working for me? Is this not working for me? Do I want to add something? Do I want to take something away? Did something big happen that changes everything? A giant freeze came through my garden and like 25% of the plants died. Well, then you have to adjust and, see, well, what can I do with this now? But if you have that sort of constructive mindset, you can make something that is really quite wonderful and enjoyable.
Yeah, you'd linked it up like mindfulness is going to lead to more choices and more choices is going to lead to freedom. And I remember listening to you say that and I was like, wow, like, and I'm a big fan of choices, right? Like Body Kindness is all about these choice options. And so I was relaying that and I was like, yeah, it really is this sense of freedom because you have more of a sense of agency over your time. And I do think that we can kind of get stuck in these ruts and routines where we're always doing X, Y, Z. And again, there are definitely going to be certain things that we cannot control and only we can do. Like that has got to be us doing it. But I do think that we can get stuck in a rut of just filling up, you refer to it as a white space in the book, but like filling up blank time, white space with things to do just because we think that that's what we should be doing in order to have a more successful, a more productive, and a more valuable life. And that might be a cultural message, but I actually don't think that that is scientifically true. So I'd love to know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, we really don't have to fill every minute. And I think white space is valuable for several reasons. One, it's practical. Lots of things take more time than you think they're going to take. So by leaving white space, you can keep yourself from running late. And pretty much nobody likes to be late and rushing. It also allows you to seize opportunities that come up. You know, if somebody wants to talk with you, somebody who works with you has these great business ideas that she wants to talk about. It's nice to be able to have those conversations. If you're in a meeting and it's going really well, it's nice to be able to stick with it. Or, you know, you've met a friend for a play date at a park and everyone's having a good time. Like how nice not to have to race off. So having open space allows us to do that and to really savor good moments when they do occur. The temptation, of course, is that we tend to put stuff in because we look at the time and see that we're available. I mean, this happens all the time. People are like, well, you know, can we meet? When are you available? And you propose sometimes. The question should first be like, well, why are we meeting? Right? Like, let's be clear on that first. And when we're clear on that, then we can decide the exact length of time that's necessary. I don't know why it's always 30 or 60 minutes. This seems sort of, arbitrary.
Arbitrary. That's a good point. Yeah. Because Outlook is giving it to me in those options.
Yeah, but who decreed Outlook to be the god of all things, right? In terms of our schedules. So, you know, maybe it's something that actually only needs 10 minutes. Maybe it's something that needs 5. Maybe it's something that needs 2 hours. But let's figure that out. Like A, does it need to happen? B, how long does it actually need to take? Now we can put it into the schedule. But, forgetting to ask those 2 questions means that we wind up with more stuff than we probably should have.
And so that's making me think that, first of all, we need to feel that we are worthy and in a position to ask those questions. And secondly, it means that we also need to do something that is very difficult for a lot of Body Kindness readers and listeners to do. And you say that in the book around the white space and the open space for thinking and being open to opportunities. And it's okay to say, not today, which I love. But what you're really saying is we're supposed to say no. And that is actually really hard for people to do. So I would love your response on how do we do it?
Well, the first thing you need to know is that your time is valuable. You only have so much of it. I think in general, time is abundant from the perspective that we have more than enough time for the things that we want to do. But in order to maintain that, we have to be much more ruthless about the things that we don't want to do. I mean, it's the same with money. You can, even on a modest income, you can do amazing things. It's just you have to choose what those amazing things are, right? You're probably not going to travel and have a big house. You're going to choose one of those. And so which one is it that is more important to you? And, the American sort of mindset is like, oh, I should have the house, but maybe not. Maybe you live in a much smaller place, drive an old car, but then to go have these amazing experiences that people are like, well, I wish I could do that. Well, maybe you could, but you'd have to prioritize differently. And it's the same thing with time, only with the added thing that we all have the same amount of time. So some people don't have to make those hard choices on money because they have more of it. But we all have to make those hard choices on time. In Juliet's School of Possibilities, which is the fable I mentioned at the beginning, the hero of the story, this very successful businesswoman who's, also got a great family life, seems very calm. The phrase she uses and tells to people is that expectations are infinite. Time is finite. You are always choosing. Choose well. So every time you are saying yes to something, you are saying no to something else. And chances are that no is going to be to something you'd like to do. If something is a 5 or a 6 on a 10-point scale, if you're saying yes to it, you might have to say no to a 9 or a 10. And that's a pretty big shame, right? Like I would hate to have that happen to people. One practical way to get yourself in this mindset, which I talk about in Off the Clock, is just whenever anyone asks you to do something in the future, ask yourself if you would do it tomorrow. And the reason this is helpful is that you are much better equipped to evaluate the opportunity costs for tomorrow than you are for, say, next January. Like who even knows what we're doing next January, right? If I look at the calendar, January's blank. Like, yeah, I'm free, right? But then I won't be in January. There's a bit of a fallacy. Like come January, I'm going to be just as busy as I am now. I'm going to have just as much going on. Only now I'll also have this other thing that I really didn't want to do, but I said yes because it looked like time was open in January. So whereas tomorrow, I know what's going on, and I know that this is not going to be a priority for me tomorrow. And if that's the case, then see if you can say no for the future as well.
Yeah. And just, I think like most anything else that makes us uncomfortable, that the best way to become more comfortable is to just practice it and then repeat it over and over again. So you might feel a lot of worry that first time that you're saying, you know what? They're right. My time is valuable. So to this thing, I'm going to say not today. And my no to that means I'm going to be able to say yes to something else. And once you realize that your biggest fear, like the earth is just going to stop spinning, once you realize that biggest fear isn't likely to come true, and you might even see that you're getting more of the outcome that you want, it can feel a little bit easier to go ahead and take that risk and try it again and again and again. And I'm sure in folks that you've worked with, it's like that it's taken that like a level of practice and commitment to then you become that kind of person who not just believes that time is valuable, but lives those values through the way that you make your daily choices and set boundaries with people. And that's going to include saying not today.
Yeah, and it's also going to include saying yes. I mean, I'm not advocating saying no to everything. I mean, there are plenty of things that when we're asked to do, I mean, they might be a little bit outside our comfort zone, but like try it. I mean, it'd be like, sometimes it's easy to hide behind no, or that seems like a lot of work. Oh, that seems like a lot of bother. I talk in the book about how we, tend to get very comfortable in our present selves and not think about what would make a good memory or what, we might look forward to. And so then we wind up sitting on the couch doing nothing as opposed to going to do something sort of adventure because, well, hey, we're tired, right? But you draw energy from meaningful things. And so I think there's a distinction here. We should say no to things that don't excite us and that don't seem aligned with our big goals. But if something is, and it just seems like it'll be a lot of work, or you're not sure how it's going to deal with the kids, or like maybe it'll be uncomfortable at first, those might be worth saying yes to. Because those are the kinds of things that can be life-changing. A trip with a friend somewhere that's a little bit different than you might usually go to, or giving a speech somewhere, or lobbying for a promotion. Like your boss says, I would really like you to go get in front of these executives over the next 6 months because I want to see you get higher in this organization. Like, well, yeah, that's scary, but you should go do it.
Yeah.
Right? So we say yes to the right things by saying no to other stuff.
Yeah, that's so well put. And, as I'm hearing you talk, it's really, I feel really drawn to let listeners know that what we're saying really is not frivolous. Like it is a matter of having a good and meaningful life. And in my experience, I think that there's two things that go hand in hand with folks. And this, if I'm individually counseling a client who's dealing with anxiety and soothing with food, say, or when I get listener questions for the show, that there's like a paired up combination of that we are lacking kind of day-to-day pleasure and fun. And I think that part of that it's related to time, right? Because pausing to notice what we would like to spend our time on that could bring pleasure and fun and meaningful, memorable experiences like you just said. And often when we lack those things, you mentioned like, yeah, you just kind of buzz through another show, not my favorite show that I can't wait to watch, don't give me any spoilers type of a show. Like that could be a joyful choice, but it's often what we're doing is we're kind of like numbing in a way, like this like draining time, like it's my only sense of me time. And we're not necessarily making these choices about things that we could actually fulfill us and be some form of fun or some form of pleasure. And so when you end up, whether it's, too many hours sofa surfing on the TV and interfering with sleep, or, not really enjoying that ice cream that you're having after dinner and before bed, that the context there is if you don't have these fun, joyful, uses of time in your life, that you're likely like in kind of a fun famine, and also like soothing your emotions just with these kind of mindless activities that really don't help enhance your life.
Yeah, no, we definitely need to make space for consciously chosen fun. And I think what often happens is we tell ourselves this story like, oh, I'm so busy, I have no time for that. But then we choose fun that's immediate and effortless, like the, surfing around or being on the web, scrolling around. And we could use that for more joyful things. But that would involve acknowledging that time exists and thinking about it and saying, well, actually, I can put pleasure into my life. Like it would be okay for me to, go do something that I enjoy, even if, I don't know, the kitchen isn't clean or all my emails aren't answered. So, we wind up surfing the web when all our emails aren't answered. But, going for a walk, that seems like that would be irresponsible.
Right.
But, so that's, I think we need to rethink that.
Yeah. And I want to pivot to have two quick questions before we get off this conversation. And one is just to highlight folks, because I really want them to get the book and do the time, study themselves. But you introduce a really interesting concept that I could relate to, where it's identifying that our whole self is actually like multiple selves, anticipating, remembering, and experiencing. And I loved that because absolutely, we have multiple parts of us and multiple voices, and they're not always aligned. So can you let folks know just briefly what they can expect to get out of that when they read the book and do it themselves, and why that's so important to how they're going to make choices about time?
Yeah, I really do think that by making mindful choices about time, we can build lives that work well for us and that make us feel like time is abundant. And it's not easy to do that, like we talked about with tending your garden. You do have to put work into it. But by looking at our time, looking back over the time, how we've spent it, how we'd like to spend it, asking ourselves these questions. Day by day, we can make adjustments and make time into something that's really beautiful. And I really, want that for anyone who's listening to this.
That's so wonderful. I think you also answered my last question, but we'll see if you got something else. And that was going to be, what is, for the most time-starved person you can imagine, what is something that you would say to inspire them to take a meaningful action and start looking at their time?
Well, the thing I'd say is that you don't have to find much time. And people will talk themselves into these corners of like, well, I have, this job and this side hustle and my kids and my aging parents and their various other responsibilities. And therefore, it's just not going to work. But, you don't have to find 10 hours a day for something that is really just for you and feels meaningful and pleasurable. How about let's aim for 30 minutes? Like, could we find 30 minutes? And maybe it doesn't even have to all be at the same time. Like, could we find 2 15-minute windows? And if you can get yourself to the point where you're spending 30 minutes a day on something that truly feels joyful, I honestly believe that changes the other 23.5 hours of the day. It does not take much. So by keeping your aspirations relatively low, you will meet them and you will start seeing what it feels like to enjoy your time. And often that can motivate people to make any bigger changes that need to happen.
Absolutely. It reminds me of the concept of spiraling up, where you start with where you're at right away and you think, what's the next choice that I can make that I think will enhance my life? So I love it. I love you. You're amazing. I'm going to include the book links and everything in the show notes. So where can folks find you and get all your great information?
Well, I hope people will come find me at lauravanderkam.com. That is just my name, my website. And you'll see my list of books and my various podcasts, Before Breakfast and Best of Both Worlds there. And hopefully people will check those out.
Thank you so much for being here, Laura.
Thank you for having me.
You've got questions and I've got answers. I am going to be reading some questions that folks submitted to me in the Body Kindness Facebook group. That is a free group, and you'll get invited when you become a Body Kindness Insider. So if you're not already an insider, bodykindnessbook.com/start. You enter your name and email, and you are going to get a free web-based program from me that can help you get started with body kindness, and you'll get in that Facebook group. I would love to see you there. So the first question, my biggest problem with time use is that I almost always seem to lack energy, and I would love to hear your thoughts on that. This is a great question. Energy is something that it is important to have, right, in the day-to-day, right, to get things done. And when you're at any time of day, whether that's when you wake up or that afternoon slump or whenever, it's just like your mind's like, oh, I just don't have the energy to do this thing. And there could be a lot of places it's coming from. So I'll just offer a brief checklist to get started. One is to think about, are you getting adequate energy in, and meaning like nourishment? So if you think about it, we get energy and nourishment from foods that we eat. So that means eating enough variety of foods, getting our vitamins and minerals, which we can get from generally, eating a balanced plate. So, there are fruits and veggies and protein foods and foods you like and things that you might think of when you think about health and nutrition. And it's, something that is important to think about to make sure that you're not trying to be so healthy that you're actually being restrictive. So that's one area that I would look at. Just, is there any chance that maybe you need to eat more food, that you need more nourishment, and that might be part of your energy needs? There is a medical component. You can find out if you might have a vitamin or mineral deficiency. Folks can have an iron deficiency or a B12 deficiency. People can have trouble metabolizing certain vitamins and minerals that are part of how your body creates energy. And so it's always a good idea to have a good relationship with your doctor, and you can explain your concerns about energy to your doctor and possibly run some lab tests, just to experiment with the medical components that might be at play. Also, it's a chance to discuss any medications that you're on, and if there's possibly any side effects, whether it's difficulty sleeping or, just a side effect where you might feel lethargic. And so that can be tough because obviously you're taking the medication for a need, but it can also be tough to realize that you're tolerating maybe a side effect of a medication. I'm not thinking of anything in particular. It's just something I think about when I think about talking to doctors. I find in my personal experience, most people who feel low on energy, that stress is a common culprit. Worries can keep people up at night. Worrying about money or family problems or worrying about the world, those are all things that can keep people up at night, or just send our thoughts into places where we feel like we might lack security or safety. That can trigger elevated anxiety. It can be difficult thoughts to stop or get out of your mind. I have a podcast on sleep that I would recommend you check out. The best way to get to that is go to bodykindnessbook.com and click on podcast. And under the podcast tab, there's a series called Learn and Grow. And in that series, you'll see Bernie and I talk about sleep. So hopefully you'll find some resources there that will help. I think it's important to acknowledge the ways in which our world, as it is now, is energy draining. And so if we think about that, if you have a financial concern, that struggling to meet the bills, this is something that I grew up with. It was like added stress that didn't seem to go away. And there were times where it did feel difficult and hopeless. So those of us listening who do have financial comforts or their privileges, it can be easier, right, to adapt to feelings of low energy, because maybe you can put some resources to get back some of your time. But other people who have less privilege, the problem is in the world. It's like the job in America that is respected the most is busyness. It's a cultural sickness. So ultimately what I think is that you should do what you can to seek more energy in your life. Absolutely. So go through these components that I discussed. But you also want to be really mindful about blame and shame, and don't blame yourself as if the world is telling us all that we should rest and take it easy, because it's not. In fact, I saw this piece on Today where Hoda came back and reflecting on her maternity leave, and she called it the best summer ever. And she seemed so happy. And I saw pictures of her with her child, and I thought it was amazing. And it made me think about how I was away with my girls for about 3 weeks this summer on a vacation, but we got to do stuff together. I got a daily walk-in that felt good. I did some professional development work and reading. And I did see some clients over this 3-week period too. So it wasn't like a complete separation from work, but how much I valued that and valued how it felt. And the reality of it is that we live in a country that doesn't respect the need for adequate parental leave. There's a lot of reasons why Hoda gets to have the best summer ever, and a lot of reasons why other people can't. And so I just wanted to end that comment with this idea that yes, we should do what we can to try to improve the quality of our own lives. And at the same time, we do need to consistently acknowledge the ways in which the world doesn't make it easy or equal for us to do so. So thank you so much for that question. Okay, so the next question. My biggest challenge with body kindness is being able to get enough sleep. I work long hours and I'm a single mom to 2 amazing teenagers. The one is a night owl who loves to come in when she's finished with her homework around 10, and we have great chats. She'll be off to college next year, so I don't want to miss out on this. And how many 17-year-olds like talking to their moms? At the other end of the day, her sister and I leave the house at 6:30 in the morning for a 0-period band rehearsal. That enables me to get to work early so I can get home in time to make dinner, care for pets, do paperwork, laundry, etc. At most, I get 6 hours of sleep, which is far less than the solid 8 I have always needed. And heaven forbid I spend any time on other body kindness choices like reading, writing, or doing a puzzle. I know this is temporary, but that doesn't mean I'm not exhausted. Yeah, so the juggle struggle is real. The first thing that I would ask to this type of question is, what bothers you most about only getting 6 hours of sleep? And seriously, what are the real physical and emotional setbacks? And I'm asking that because it sounds like you're not getting as much sleep as you would like, but the choice options you're making to bond with your girls is time well spent and it's good for your health. And so it does make sense to me to really home in on, is your mind telling you, like shooting on you, you should be sleeping more, or are you having real difficulty getting through your day because you can't get a handle on your sleep? Do you tend to be the kind of person who on the weekends can catch up and really it's okay, it's just you're not getting as much sleep as you would like? So, and that's for anyone really to try to understand the context of what is bothering you. I think you might consider the time use tracking that we talked about in this podcast to see if you can find those 15 or 20-minute increments for reading or crossword. Also, I don't know if you have sick days or personal time that you could use for medical appointments. I'm wondering if you could also take advantage for a day to rest, sleep, do crosswords, or nothing at all. Make sure that you're recognizing all that, the juicy benefits of the family bonding that you are doing. And when you know you need to catch up a night's rest and it's during the week, you feel that exhaustion, you feel bad about maybe setting some boundaries on getting sleep, but maybe tell your 17-year-old that you'd like to chat right after dinner, let her know you're going to bed early. That's really great modeling for her. And, your kids might be able to help with some of that evening routine stuff that you're doing. You talked about laundry and different things like that. I think teenagers, it's great for them to have those types of responsibilities. And so maybe think about collaborating around that. The last thing I want to say is you mentioned you're a single mom and, that's hard. I don't even know how hard that is because I'm partnered, but I have the feeling when I imagine what it must be like, I want to acknowledge that it is hard. If you can get help even here and there, what kind of help would you get? Think about that. What would you do with your time if you could get some of that back? And give yourself permission to do just that. But all in all, it's at single mom, I'm like, wow, you're amazing. You are doing a great job. And try to look for those opportunities where you might be able to feel better about what you are able to do. And I hope that really helps you. Okay, next question. I'm a working mom. I feel like the combination of no time to myself and constant exhaustion have led to me taking really, really poor care of myself. It doesn't help that I'm an introvert, so I crave that quiet alone time like a plant needs the sun, but I very rarely get it. When I do finally have a few minutes to myself, I tend to be so burnt out that I just numb out in front of the TV. I feel confident that I'm not alone when I say that I think I just kind of shut out whatever my body is telling me because I'm just too damn exhausted to manage it, which means that my body just gets neglected and I kind of exist in a fog all the time. I also think this gets in the way of feeling like I'm instilling healthy habits in my daughter, since I'm mostly just too tired to model the kinds of habits I think would be better for her to be seeing. So, this sounds like burnout to me, and hopefully our podcast chat is already giving you ideas. I have a few more insights to share. So as a daughter, I saw my working mom doing whatever she could for her family, and that made me love and respect her even more, even in ways in which I felt like maybe I needed her more. I knew that her work mattered and was important and essential for our family. And that type of modeling is really important. So starting with the things you do for her, think about with her and together, right? So from baths and showers, teeth brushing, joining you in meal prep and cleanup, flower arranging is a bonding activity, any exercise or movement or dance together. A spiral up jar, I mentioned that in the book. This is when you can offer quotes, affirmations, gratitudes, positive aspects of somebody else, what you appreciate about them, and you put them on pretty pieces of paper, or not pretty. If you have ugly paper, that's fine too. Get it done. But then this is something that you can build the spiral up jar, and then you can also take from the spiral up jar, and it really does help people feel connected. Your need for alone time is real and valid, and we need to honor that. And I'm wondering how you might do with meditations that you could do with your daughter. So sound baths. There's a book, Sitting Still Like a Frog, that has a meditation CD. You might find that at the library. There's a guided workbook as well. I actually don't know your kids' ages. So a lot of the things that I'm talking about, I'm thinking of from myself with my kids' ages being 7 and 6. But those are some things that I was thinking could help. With respect to the meditating, I think by practicing it regularly for a few minutes a day, I think you'll be able to better tolerate that chatter and that mental gymnastics in your mind in the short term. And I also want to direct you to the Burnout podcast episodes. So these are podcasts with the co-authors of Burnout, Emily and Amelia Nagoski. And you can find those if you go to bodykindnessbook.com and click on podcasts. Those are going to be organized under stress and anxiety. So those are episodes 117 and 118 in the podcast. So hopefully that helps you, even if a little bit. Okay, next question. I'd like to know how to respond to people who make comments like, wow, you must have a lot of time on your hands, when they see that you are doing the things to take care of yourself. It's such a rude comment, and I'm never sure how to answer it other than say I make time to do things I enjoy and make me feel better. But then I just get more snide comments like, oh, I wish I could do that, but I have to do A, B, and C. The person seems to be insinuating that I'm not working hard in life because I'm able to find time for myself. I think this is a great comment, and I really think you're hitting on cultural values. You're the rebel here. But you know what? This person is probably part envious. Like, I want that. It might sound snide, but it's like, no, I really want that. Almost in a sense of desperation or even anger that somebody can't get something that they want and they see someone else achieving that they're angry and frustrated with their situation and culture. And I think part also genuinely curious, like, seriously, how do you do it? Teach me. She's probably in compare and despair mode in her mind. So try to have some empathy that you have what other people want. Next time you hear that, whether it's sarcastic or not, try to step into your role of person who figured it out and talk about the benefits that you feel. I'm so much happier when I protect my me time, and offer some help if you want. Is there anything I could do to help you feel better about where you're at? Is there any tip that I could give you that might help you take the next step? And I'm so sorry that you're struggling. If you can remember a time where you've been there too, share that. I've been there too. Here's a few things that help me whenever you're interested. And that's really the most kind of generous thing you can do, is give them space to feel their emotions and offer to help if you feel you have that emotional energy. Once again, I think this is so much more about our cultural narrative about what it means to have access to rest. Who gets downtime? And for those of us who can reject that bullshit, we need to keep doing it and advocating for those who don't have the freedoms to protect their time. Next question. As a teacher, I'm feeling the time barrier a lot right now. I would love to do some kind of movement and more body kindness in the morning when I have more energy, but I already get up at 4:45 a.m. and that just gets me to work on time. I don't think I could manage any earlier. Wow, 4:45. Yeah, I agree. When I go to bed with my kids, I count ahead 9 hours, assuming it will take me about an hour of listening to music or meditation to get to sleep. And I feel happy if that means my alarm's going to go off at 5 or sometimes 6. And if I could get up, get my coffee, and get out on a walk and be back for them in the morning, sure, I love the idea of that. It doesn't always necessarily happen. Depends on the sunrise, depends on the weather, depends on if there was something that didn't get done the night before that's a better use of my time. So I really can appreciate the idea of that morning window, but 4:30 is early for me and probably most people. I do not blame you for feeling like you can't do any earlier. So I would just accept that that's your schedule. Maybe take a look at your after school schedule. Could you do a quick 30-minute walk right after school before anything else, just like decompression mode? Maybe take advantage of the weekends for higher energy workouts or longer workouts if that's something that you really want and value and miss. Personally, I've never been happier with exercise since changing my perspective and expectations for what is good enough. One idea that I have to offer that is possible for the morning, maybe, would you try 10 minutes of sun salutations, yoga in the morning? I'm thinking restorative or gentle level one type stuff. Or like I said, there's a series A of sun salutations, series B, maybe some beginner yoga. Nothing too intense because you are just waking up. I'm thinking about free videos on YouTube that you might be able to find. Jessamine Stanley, Everybody Yoga. She was on my podcast. Her book, Everybody Yoga, is really good. And I definitely recommend that you listen to that podcast. She also has an app now. It's called The Underbelly. So possibly check those out. Also Curvy Yoga. And I guess Jelly was also a podcast guest. So maybe check those out as possible resources for you. But I'm just thinking about starting the day with that breath work and some yoga flow, some nice music. That might help you get energized for the classroom without sacrificing the sleep that you need, and literally a short burst of time, 10, maybe 12 minutes. Okay, one final question. I criticize myself for how I spend my time, especially for rest. That's literally the question. So hello, inner critic. Nice to see you. That's the first thing I would recommend anyone to do. Greet your thought bullies because they are there and they will show up when you expect them to, and they're going to show up when you don't expect them to. Make sure you go back to part 2 of Body Kindness, how you feel. Be sure to revisit the PACT skill, presence, acceptance, choose, take action, and the tips for handling thought bullies for much more support there. Remember that observing and allowing your thoughts to exist while you continue to take care for yourself. And that includes rest. No one tells you what body kindness is or isn't. You get to decide. Acknowledge those thoughts and change how you relate to them. Oh, are you trying to remind me how much I value productivity? Well, part of productivity is rest. And so I'm choosing to rest here. Thank you, mind, for trying to be helpful, but you're really not. So thank you all so much for these reader questions. I hope they're helpful. Don't forget to pick up Body Kindness, leave a review for the book, recommend it to others. If you want to order signed copies as gifts, bodykindnessbook.com/order. If you have general questions for the podcast, I answer those with Bernie. We do those 4 to 6 shows a year. I'm going to try to do more of those because questions are really piling up. So that's bodykindnessbook.com/question. And please leave a rating and review for the show. And if you can support us, that's gofundme.com/bodykindness. And that's our show. The podcast is made possible with support from listeners. Please donate to help offset production costs at gofundme.com/bodykindness. And please rate and review the show when you have a moment. It really matters. Let's keep the conversations going on Facebook. Search Body Kindness and request to join the group for Body Kindness readers and listeners. Have a question for us to answer on a future episode? visit bodykindnessbook.com/question. Body Kindness books and audiobooks are available wherever books are sold. To request a signed print copy, visit bodykindnessbook.com/order. For other questions about this podcast, please email info@bodykindnessbook.com.